Hi, my name's Ed Lofts. I'm a 7 times world kickboxing champion. I'm also a business owner, property developer, and I manage an investment portfolio as well. Now, I didn't used to do any of that. I was an absolute mess. I've hit rock bottom, I've bounced back up, and there is absolutely nothing special about me that isn't also special about other people, the people watching, your friends, yourself, that anybody can go through these stories and they can realize that it's the choices, the people you have around you, and a sequence of events that can lead to better things if the correct actions are taken on the way there. And that's what's happened to me. I've been really lucky. I've had very, very amazing mentors. Tim Fletcher's asked me to do this video to tell my story. And I want to add that I'm not a vulnerable person who's being taken advantage of by being asked to tell my story. I'm telling this story out of respect for Tim, because if it helps one other person like Tim helped me, and Tim's information, and the lift program that he's got, it helped me, it's helped my mum, it's helped my girlfriend, it's helped absolutely anybody that's been willing to put the effort in to make the positive changes. So I want to thank Tim for that. And I'm here to tell my story about complex trauma and my upbringing and how it's affected me to this day as well. So right now, I'm 43 years old. I've moved house around 25 times by the time I'm 43, which is a hell of a lot of moving. Nothing really settled, and I can get into a bit more of an explanation about that. So I'm going to go from the age of 0 to 8. So before I was born, there was a story that my mum had a miscarriage and they thought they'd lost the baby. But a couple of weeks later, after they found out there was bleeding involved and stuff, my mum's actually fine, and I was fine. What they said, that there was a chance I was a twin and one of them didn't make it, and then obviously I'm here now. So right from the off, there was this kind of like unsettled, non-stable environment to go through, because what happened was my mum was moving furniture while she was pregnant, very early pregnancy, but you shouldn't be doing those type of things at the time, but sometimes there's a necessity for it. I think it's really important as well. So I've done an ACE test again this morning, which is an adverse childhood experience test, and I scored 8 out of 10. The two things that haven't happened to me: I haven't suffered any sexual abuse from anybody, and I haven't had any parent who was heavily addicted to drugs or drinking. So there was some stability in the house, but we've had family members in very close proximity to us hugely struggle with their own mental health issues. We've had divorces, we've had suicides, we've had all sorts of different issues. So I'm going to go through my story a little bit, and then if it sounds familiar to anybody and they can take anything out of it, even if it just helps one person, then I think it's valuable and it's worth doing. So starting off, we were at a private school. So I was 3 years old and I was at a private school. They didn't teach us really anything I don't remember learning to spell. I don't really remember much, apart from I used to steal from the tuck shop at school. So at a very early age, maybe 5 years old, I would ask to go to the toilet, and I would go out of the classroom, and there was a window in the door, and if you turned right, that's the way to. So I'd go out and pretend I was going right, then I'd duck down, crawl underneath so the teacher couldn't see, and I'd let myself into the tuck room, and I would just eat sort of like what were club biscuits at the time. It's like a chocolate biscuit with caramel inside it, different things like this. If I was really feeling a bit naughty that day, I would grab a whole box of biscuits and I would take it into the toilet and I would eat the whole lot before I went back to the classroom. It was a very small school, private school. It probably only had about 70 people in the whole school. And once my mum and dad broke up, we couldn't afford to go there anymore, so we had to leave. But there was a few things that happened at that school. They used to be able to hit us. So there was the threat of a cane, which was a very thin piece of wooden cane. And they would, from what I can remember, they would hit you across the hand or the bum with it, the back of the legs, and or the slipper. So the teacher would take their slipper off and they were allowed to hit you if you were naughty. There was one occasion at the school where there was a new kid from another country, and he'd come to the school, and in the playground, he decided to pick up half a brick. So he's got a block of concrete as such, and he's running around trying to hit people in the head with it, probably only at the ages of about 5 or 6 years old. And he's hit another kid in the head, and the kid's fallen on the floor, has cut his head, and he was causing absolute havoc. And then me and some of the other kids managed to get the brick off of him. And then a girl who was my mum's best friend's daughter, so she wasn't my friend, she was my mum's best friend's daughter. She literally whispered into my ear a word that I'd never heard before. It was a racist slur towards this other kiddie. And I've just blurted it out because she said, call him this. So I've called him it. The next thing you know, I'm grabbed up, I'm pulled into the school, and there is the threat of what we call 6 of the best, which this used to happen at home and it used to happen at school. So 6 of the best was 6 hits, generally on a bare bum. So you'd be put over someone's knee with your trousers pulled down, and then they'd crack you 6 times with the slipper or their bare hand to punish you, basically, for what you'd done. And on this occasion, it was my mum actually worked at the school, so it was my mum that delivered the hits. I didn't know what I'd done wrong. I didn't understand what racism was. I didn't understand what the word even meant. It was just something I'd blurted out, and I was absolutely punished for it. Obviously, racism is absolutely wrong. On that occasion, though, there should have been some form of protection. There was no investigation. Well, why is that kid hitting everybody in the head with a brick, first of all? And the ongoing thing was the people that should have been protecting me were more worried about what it looks like externally, because they couldn't have them thinking that their children were racist or their children were horrible, when in actual fact there was one kid who had his head hit by a brick. So there was this kind of like running theme of injustice through the upbringing. There was bullying at that school. The teachers weren't very good about things, and obviously there was stealing on my part as well. So right from the off, looking back, it's extremely dysfunctional and messy. That was at that sort of age. What then happened was, when my mum and dad split up, we got taken out of that school. So we had to leave the school, and we were openly kind of like, we can't afford it anymore, so we've got to go to a public school. And like I said, we had about 70 people in that school, and when we moved to a public school, it had about, I'm thinking 500 kids in it or something like this. There was about 30 kids in a class in this other school, and I did not get on. I didn't transition between the two because my mum and dad were breaking up, so that's a big change. The school was a big change. Not having my dad around really affected me. You're kind of wondering, where is he? What's he doing? And then along with this, there was a story that kind of got woven into it, which is kind of parental alienation, where one parent is telling the children things about the other parent to interrupt the relationship. And my mum wasn't doing it on purpose. She had her own issues to deal with and her complex trauma, which she's now dealt with, which is amazing as well. And she's a very, very different person now. But what I was told is that my dad is over in Brighton with somebody else, with a new woman, and they've got another kid, and that could even be his child, because the name of the child was my dad's favourite flower. Like, so he chose the name of it, but it wasn't true at all. But I then started to take on board this feeling of like, he's chosen someone else instead of choosing me. Why does he not want to be with me? Why does he not want to live with me anymore? And as a child, you take on this kind of core belief that you're the reason that the parents have split up. What could I have done differently for it to have all stayed together? When in actual fact, it wouldn't have mattered if I had all the resources in the world and I was a full-grown adult. I wouldn't have been able to keep that relationship together because it just wasn't working at the time. Anyway, so simultaneously with all that going on, I had a younger sister being born. We then had my mum suffering from blood clots. So she used to cough and lumps of flesh would come up. She would literally be over the sink coughing and asking you to hit her on the back. So you'd whack her on the back and she'd cough up a lump of flesh with blood. And then she wouldn't look too good and have to be rushed into intensive care at the hospital. And along with that, she was having these nervous breakdowns. The reason that this is she was working herself to the bone all the time with the kids, not resting, never being in her parasympathetic nervous system due to being busy all the time. There was always a house move going on, or moving the furniture around, or having to try to do the house up. There was always dramas within the external family, kind of other relatives and things going on. And my nan and my granddad used to cause absolute havoc all the time. One of the things that I remember around my nan's house, I wet the bed around there when I was probably 3, I think, and she's grabbed hold of me. She's thought I was laughing about wetting the bed, when I was laughing because it was so cold in her house. There was steam coming off the bed, and I woke up and there was light coming through the window and you could see the steam. And I thought to myself, oh crikey, the bed's on fire. And then with that, she's grabbed me, put me in the bath, and she's squirted me with a cold shower, and she's calling me horrible names like, this is disgusting, you shouldn't be doing this at your age. So she's belittling me and humiliating me, whilst at the same time squirting me with a cold shower. And it was just an environment that was not nice for any children to be growing up in. You used to get called the wrong name all the time. So she would call me my cousin's name constantly as well. Just whether it was done on purpose or not, you kind of don't know. But the environment, it wasn't nurturing, it wasn't nice. But there were points of kindness. Like my nan used to put on a computer game. She was always up to speed with technology, so she'd put on what was a Commodore 64 or a Commodore Plus 4 back then, that she had both, and she'd put a tape in, you'd wait for it to load up, and then she'd let you play a game, and she'd bring you a cup of tea and a biscuit. But on the other side of it, you knew if you put your foot wrong or said something wrong, there was the chance that you would sort of get whacked, or it would cause a massive row. So we had this theme running through the background of instability, constant moves, and constant chaos, mixed in with a recipe of betrayal, humiliation, and being belittled as well. So all of these things they all added up. Mum was ill, then dad's left, and you don't know what you're doing. You're literally lost. Then one occasion we had to go to the courthouse to discuss custody. So my mum and dad, whether they were both going for custody or not, I'm not really sure. But we got taken to the courthouse. We've gone inside. It's not a conversation I wanted to be having at that age. I was probably only like maybe 7 or 8 at the time. The ladies walked us in through these set of doors. You had to go through the metal detectors at the front and stuff. And we sat in a small room, and they basically saying, who do you want to live with? But in front of your mum and your dad, you don't want to say to your mum, oh, I want to live with dad, because you don't want mum to be upset. But you don't want to say to dad, I want to live with mum, because you don't want your dad to be upset. So this was my first experience of fight or flight. I basically was backed into a corner where emotionally I was uncomfortable. I was in a situation that I didn't want to be in. I couldn't express myself, and I just thought, I'm out of here. So I jumped up out of the room, ran to the door, opened the door, and ran out. And the lady said, don't worry. She said to my mum, don't worry, he can't get out of the courthouse, because the doors are key coded on the way in and the way out. What I'd done though is I'd watched her put the key code in on a couple of doors, and I'd noticed that all the key codes were the same. This was probably hypervigilance. So I'm so alert by watching out for getting whacked or upsetting people, that I'm like, okay, this lady's going to lock us in the room and I need that code. So on the way in, I've got the codes, which I used on the way out, and I managed to get out of the courthouse, which so the police station and the courthouse is attached. So technically I've run out, got out to the main road, and I've climbed up a tree, about 40 foot up a tree, and I've just stayed in the tree. And eventually they twigged that he has got out, and they all there was like everyone outside I think there was some police and different people looking for me and stuff, whatever. I've looked down at everybody, and I'm just like, this is absolute insanity, the way that things were doing. And I used to tell my mum all through this, I used to say everything is wrong, and I would have these kind of like little not meltdowns, but being upset. I was just literally crying, and I would just say everything's wrong. And what I meant was everything was wrong. The way we were brought up, the way my mum was brought up, the way that children are nurtured is all wrong. The society that we have now does not cater for people who are vulnerable, who are upset, who need nurturing, who need shelter. And all these kids grow up asking why. And they've got all these questions, which is what I had all the way through. I don't want to keep saying it's about other people because it's about me as well. I got brought up with huge amounts of questions that weren't answered. And not only were they not answered, they were dismissed. So you had a running underlined message of betrayal, humiliation, dismissal, abandonment, and neglect. And that's what I grew up in, basically. So during that period as well, we had other things happen. Like I had an uncle who was a really nice guy. I used to wet the bed a lot when I was a kid. If I fell asleep and I'd had a glass of water or anything, I would just literally wet myself whilst I was asleep. And he had a Rolls Royce, my uncle, and I was like 4 or something, and I fell asleep in the back of his Rolls Royce on the way to his house because they were looking after us for the weekend, and I wet myself in the back of his Rolls Royce, and he did not care. He was like, "Don't worry about it, like, it'll sort it out." But my auntie was like a bit furious about it, kind of thing. So you had this kind of contrast of there was some really nice people that should have been listened to and dealt with things certain ways, but then we had the other side of the family, the flip side of it, that really did not deal with anything well, and they used to belittle people and humiliate them because kids wet themselves. It's not a big deal. That kind of happened, but my uncle unfortunately committed suicide and wasn't around. There was kind of no explanation for it. As a kid, you don't know, you just know that that person's gone. We then had my granddad, who passed away from cancer. My sister also ended up with cancer. She woke up one day and she couldn't move her legs. She was paralyzed, and they found out that she had a cancer within her spine. She recovered from it, but then much later on, she passed away as well, which was really sad for the whole family. We had London in a hospital. We had my entire family there. My sister was not very well, really suffering in pain. The cancer had gone through her whole body, and we were all present when she kind of took her last breath. She gasped. There was this kind of sigh, and she just passed away. And it was a really sad time for everybody, my mum and my dad and my brothers as well. The whole family is not a very nice day to have to deal with, but we've bounced back from that, and the family now has, through the grieving process and understanding how it works, we do have a better relationship with some of our family now, which is really important. So we had I had this running occurrence through my life of being cold. So we had the incident with my nan in the shower. I had another one where it was really snowing, and I remember being stood in the field opposite our house. We'd gone like sledging in the snow, and I'm freezing. I had a cold sore on my lip at a very young age, which means one of my aunties or someone had probably got a cold sore and gone, "Oh, I'll kiss you on the cheek," or whatever, when they said hello. So a kid that age shouldn't even have cold sores if they've been looked after properly. And I'm just freezing cold, needing to go home, and nobody was listening to me. And this is a reoccurring thing, that the shower incident, me being freezing cold. I was very thin as a kid, and I became celiac at one point, so I didn't have a huge amount of body weight, which meant I got cold very quickly. And everybody else was having fun and playing, and I'm just freezing cold, stood there shivering. And it seemed like, for what was like an eternity, even though we only lived over the road, someone could have walked me back. So this being cold, still to this day, if I get cold, I become very, very irritable. I'm not a nice person to be around when I'm cold. And that's even like, I can make myself do plunge pools after saunas, and I can go in cold showers. That's not a problem. But it's when I'm physically cold and I'm outdoors somewhere, I have to make sure I bring. My friends make a joke of it when we go on our motocross bikes now and stuff. I take extra layers everywhere, just in case I get cold, because it still triggers these not very nice memories, and the emotional feelings that come with it are like flashbacks from being cold. The last kind of story I'll give you about being cold was, we went on a YMCA trip with the family before my mum and dad split up, and I was in a canoe, and I was with an adult. My parents were in a different canoe, but I was with one of the adults of the other kids. They're paddling along, and the particular parent didn't really know what they were doing, so they stood up and capsized the canoe. And it was October, I think. I fell in. My life jacket didn't fit, so my arms started to come up, and the life jacket was kind of like coming off my arms, and my head's going under. And I started screaming, "Save me first, mummy, save me first, daddy," at the age of around 5 years old. And all the parents didn't know really what to do, so they were all paddling across trying to get these kids out of the thing. I think they then ended up collapsing another canoe, so the other canoe capsized, so there was more and more people in the water. And I'm expecting my own parents to come and get me out of the water, because I'm freezing cold and I'm in shock. I almost went into hypothermia. My lips went purple, and I was like blue, basically. And I eventually got taken out. But it was this thing of like, everybody else is more important than me. I'm going to be looked after last and overlooked constantly. And even to this day in my family, it is so difficult for them to hear me. So I say to somebody, "I need this," and they go, "Oh yeah," and then it doesn't get done. And now I have to do 3 or 4 times what I should do, even to this day, to be heard. But the difference is, now I'm loud enough to do it. Not in an aggressive way, but I have to really speak up for myself and make sure I've got these boundaries, because for some reason, being in the position in the family I was overlooked in the middle. So I was my mum and dad's first child. My sister was their second child, but I had 2 older siblings as well from different partners with my mum. So there was kind of this dysfunctional mismatch of the family, which is an ongoing thing, which again led to this neglect. It was kind of like, who should be looking after whose responsibility is it? And when the parents have got more than one kid and not enough commodities or time or energy to look after everybody, something has to drop off, basically. And normally it was the attention that got given to me. On another occasion, with my mum obviously being very ill quite a lot and going in and out of hospital, there was a time where we had scaffold outside the house. And this is to give you an example of how frightened we were as kids, even though really we didn't need to be. But we'd got this kind of message that if you cause any trouble, you cause too much attention on you, it's going to be bad. So I've climbed up the scaffold whilst everyone else is at the shop. I've been left at home, climbed up the scaffold, and I'm three stories of a building up the scaffold. We had the bottom flat, which was a very nice big flat. But I've fallen, and I've ping-ponged off of the scaffold on the way down, and I've hit the floor. My arms wrapped around one of the poles, and I snapped it clean about here. So my hand was swinging backwards and forwards, and I'm kind of looking at it thinking, ow, I'm winded. I really hurt myself on the way down. But I've managed to get myself up and crawl back inside. But then the problem solving has to start. I got told not to climb on the scaffold whilst anyone was out. I shouldn't have been on there anyway, because it's dangerous. Now I've broken my arm, and if I tell them my arm's broken, they'll know I'm on the scaffold, and I'm going to get in big trouble. So I've gone in, I've put my coat on, and I've just gone about my business normally in the house with a broken arm. I think at the age of around about 7 or 8 again. This was after my mum and dad broke up though, but everything was a very condensed time frame. So mum's got back from the shops, she's cooked dinner, she's had time to cook dinner and everything, and dinner's on the table, and I come to the table with my coat on. And my mum's kind of looking at me a bit funny. I believe that day we had something like pork chops or something. And I've picked up the knife and fork to try to cut the pork chop, and my hand is just swinging backwards and forwards in my coat. And I can't grip, I can't do anything. And my mum says, "Take off your coat. What are you doing with it at the table?" So I take my coat off, and there's my arm snapped with my hand dangling. And she's like, what the hell's gone on? And then the big drama starts, and we have to get to the hospital. They had to put my arm in a cast. It then didn't set properly. It needed to be rebroken. And I remember going back into the hospital and waking up from the gas and air and seeing a rubber mallet and stuff. So this entire thing was neglectful. There was fear against the responses we were going to get when we'd done something wrong. Not that we weren't allowed to make mistakes. We weren't belittled for making mistakes, but we were kind of humiliated. The running theme about me falling in the river from the canoe, I was teased about it. Save me first, mummy. Save me first, daddy. It was a teasing thing. Another time I'd made a spelling mistake. I'd written at school a report, kind of like a thing about what we did at Christmas. So I've written it was a tight squeeze at the table at my aunt's house because we were all crammed in around the table. But when I brought it home and showed my parents, it said it was a tit squeeze at the table, because I couldn't spell properly, because the teachers weren't teaching us properly at school. And I was teased about it. It was like, ha, 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 look what he's written. And even to this day, under pressure, when I've got to write something with somebody watching or type something with other people there or write on the board or whatever, I get the same response. I'm going to be judged if I make a spelling mistake or if my handwriting's not clear. And I get these emotional flashbacks come up. So there's a huge amount of information there about what it was like growing up in that environment and how it felt. And for me, the running theme is it wasn't safe, it wasn't caring, but on the other hand, why do you always feel that it was? And it's because of the breadcrumbs. Like, one good day can outweigh all those bad days. And one bit of validation from a parent, one hug when you didn't think you needed one, but the parent just gives you a hug, maybe because they even needed a hug, and it just makes you feel better. It can overwrite this. And we all want, as kids, again, there it is me doing it. I wanted as a kid to have a good relationship with my parents. Is desperately what I wanted. I wanted a good dad and I wanted a good mum. So you hang on to all the good bits. Like, I remember like playing frisbee with my dad at places, and he'd literally be able to catch the frisbee doing a back somersault off of a tree stump and things like this. He's a fascinating person who I wanted to get to know, but they didn't have the capacity to let you know them. And it's because of their shame. They're stuck there. They think that if you see them for how they really are, you're going to reject them as well. So then they can't accept love. It all gets intermingled, and the relationships have barriers between them. And what it causes is isolation. You end up thinking, I've got to do everything myself. As a kid, this came out in different ways. It came out in imaginary friends for me. It came out about taking things apart. So I would literally get a screwdriver set and take the back off of a TV to see how it worked. Or I remember taking a jigsaw saw apart completely. It was my mum's birthday present, actually. It's like either someone bought it for her, it was her present to herself, because she used to like making things, and I dismantled it, and she went mad that I'd taken this apart. I put it back together and it worked fine, but the health issues that came from it, I ended up celiac as a kid, so I couldn't eat wheat for a very, very long time, and I was very, very underweight. I'll put some of these up as well. But the overall gist of it was chaotic dysfunction, no resolution to anything ever. So nothing ever got resolved. If there was a problem, it got swept under the rug and it didn't get talked about ever again. And if there was a conflict within the family, my mum and dad would happily fight. Our entire family would fight other people, but only for the principle of something. They would never stand up and say, okay, we're on one side and you're taking advantage of that person. I'm going to defend that person. They would rather defend a principle of right and wrong than an actual instance of right and wrong where one person was being treated unfairly or injustice was being used against them. So you kind of got this message that we weren't important. I can only speak for myself, obviously. in the family, but I do know some of the other stories. And as we all grew up together, everything drifted apart very, very slowly, and it kind of broke the family, I suppose, into different bits. We weren't the family that we should have been after a while. So this type of upbringing moved through when I'm obviously adolescent. I'm in a different environment. I've met my martial arts instructors, luckily. I've been given some direction. I'm very active, and I start to learn drills which help me coordinate better, and my brain starts to function properly. I gain a better understanding of executive function of the brain through these different coordinated martial arts drills, and it starts to help recover myself from these traumas. Right through my whole life, I was telling my family something was wrong. I was saying to people, the way that you're acting, the reactions are wrong. This shouldn't be like this. And I used to cry sometimes, and my mum would say, "What's wrong?" I'd say, "Everything's wrong. The way you guys are acting, the way we're responding to each other." I said, "It's wrong." And it turns out later I was correct, and there is a better way to articulate it all and understand it. And what needed to happen was people should have listened more and been there for each other, and maybe they would have solved these problems a lot quicker. But from the modeling that we had growing up, that's what we expect is out there. I've talked a bit about what the family was like and the upbringing, but what about the external environment around us? Because we ended up not having much money, we obviously had to move schools, but it had a knock-on effect on other things. So we used to get asked to go and get electricity from the shop. So we'd have an electricity key that you'd charge money onto. You pay some money, they charge it up at the shop, and then you can take it home and plug it into the box on the wall, and it gives you your electricity for the week, so you can't end up in debt with the electricity companies. I got asked to go and get electricity once, so I've jumped on my bike as a very small kid, probably 11 or something, and I rode past Hastings Pier. On the way past the pier, a gentleman pulled out, and I'd previously had a mountain bike stolen from us. So my brother and some of his friends borrowed it to go swimming. They locked it up outside, but it got stolen. And I'm riding along, and this guy kind of pulls up next to me, and I looked, and I didn't say it to him, but I just said out loud, "Nice bike," because he was riding the adult's version of the bike that I had stolen. I carried on riding, not thinking of anything of it. And the next thing you know, this guy's following me, and he is following me, sort of asking questions. And I quite quickly identified him as a paedophile. It was obvious what he was at, what he was playing at. We'd been prepped by my mum on many, many occasions about strangers and what people get up to and what's out in the world and things. And luckily on this occasion, it worked, because he followed me all the way from Hastings Pier to the town centre where Seaboard used to be. Seaboard was the electricity company. They had a big green machine on the outside of the wall. You put the key in, you put £6 coins in, and you get your electricity and you can come home. So I did that. The moment the guy saw that I was getting electricity, he said to me, "Oh, you guys are short of money. If you want, you can come to my house and do some odd jobs." And it's obviously the banter that these type of people use. It's the narrative that they weave into things to try to make it sound like they're being helpful, and it's the grooming and the type of narrative they use. So spotted obviously quite quickly, but I'm starting to get very scared because he's being super persistent and he won't go. I'm obviously in an area where there's lots of other adults, so I was kind of safe in some ways, but he was following me. So I went back, started to drive back to go home, and I got round the pier area, and there was a guy from the Sea Cadets, which is like the Royal Navy kind of cadets. And I said to him, I said, "This adult's following me, this guy's following me, can you get him to get," and he did. He sort of had a word with him and told him to clear off, and I made the way home. I remember being absolutely petrified that I was still being followed all the way home. We got home, told my mum, called the police. The police came around with a folder and they had the folder with all the photos in, and I pointed out the guy, and the police knew him really well anyway. They were very aware of him. And the police told us that at any one time on Hastings Pier, there was up to 20 paedophiles on the pier waiting for somebody that they could grab or take off, like a child that's by themselves. So at the time, my mum and stuff, we were shocked about this statistic. But what the police did, the police used to take a camera down there and just take photos of people, and they would identify them. And this policeman, that's what he said. He said that they would have up to 20 people there, always waiting for a kid, and the police knew about it, and it wasn't publicised during this. This same guy, this paedophile, he was seen later by us in a place called Jungle Tumble, which is another kids' amusement park in the old town, and his bike was parked outside, and he was sat in Jungle Tumble, obviously again waiting to see what he could do to maybe grab a kid or something. So the environment at home was not safe, but the environment outside wasn't safe. So the hypervigilance had to be settled in order for me to get anything done and stay safe all the time. And it just shouldn't have been like that. The parents and the adults should have been protecting us. And again, it's another reason that we're abandoned and let down and neglected by not only our own families, but the environment around us and the systems that are in place to protect people that are not as vulnerable as some other people, but still have certain vulnerabilities. So this was an ongoing theme as well, this not safe environment, whether it be at school or at home. You're getting hit at school, you're getting hit at home, you're getting followed by paedophiles when you go to the shop. Where the hell is a kid meant to be brought up and stay safe? That particular thing, having somebody follow you right kind of over your shoulder, asking questions, that's played out now that I get an emotional flashback anytime someone tailgates me in their car. To the point where I will quite happily pull my car over, like stop in front of someone, get out the car and just walk up to the person who's doing it and say, move your car back or there's going to be big trouble. And then they go, oh, they kind of get flustered and generally back off. But it gives me the same emotional feeling that now I'm big enough to do something about it, that I have a duty to stop that happening. All it is, it's the connection is somebody being just over my shoulder behind me. I know they're there and they're kind of being followed, if this makes sense. If I get that feeling straight away, it makes me angry. To the point where one day I thought I saw that bloke as an adult, and some of the things I thought I was going to go and do to the person, but then I was kind of, it probably isn't them. It's many, many years later and things like this. So you have to be really careful with these emotional flashbacks, that you don't go and react in a bad way that can affect yourself affect your life, your positive life in a negative way. So how it all played out overall is injustice, humiliation, betrayal, rejection, and abandonment. They're the weapons that have been used against us, or me, growing up, and people in general, I believe. And each one of those different things is like a wound. It causes, so injustice could be like a burn. It needs to be treated as if it's a burn. It needs to be cooled down first. It needs cream on it. It needs care, and it might need a skin graft type of thing. Humiliation's different. Humiliation could be like a whip, and it just leaves a rip or a tear in the skin, and it needs to be looked after differently. Betrayal is like an internal thing. So it's a rupture from inside coming out, and it affects our ability to react and act very differently. Rejection is another one, where it could be like a stab in the back kind of thing, or these could be betrayals. But all of these wounds are different ways that we've been damaged, and they leave a shard of shame within us. And unless that shame is taken out, the wounds can't heal. And if we're still wounded, anything that reminds us of that day when we were injured with that implement can be re-stimulated. And because the wound is open, the emotions come out easier, and we can erupt a lot more than we would if it was healed. And out of it, it's created a set of feelings where some days growing up, I felt like I wasn't good enough, or I was defective, or that I didn't measure up. Like if it was a competitive environment, Doesn't matter whether I've won or not, I still could have done more. It was even me comparing to a better version of myself that I was always striving for. Some days there's helplessness and powerlessness. Like you just feel powerless, you feel unworthy, and kind of have this message that you're unloved and nobody's going to love you, and that you've always been forgotten, that you're overlooked and nobody even notices you in the first place as well. You get these feelings of being incapable and unforgivable. Not only are you incapable, when you get something wrong, because you're incapable, I can't even forgive you for it being wrong. And again, all of these are shame-based. They're beliefs about ourselves that have cracked open out of all of these adverse experiences that happened, but also they're the neglectful bits from us, things that should have happened to us, like the aftercare, the resolutions, the hugs, the nurture that should have been there after something bad happened. And you feel like that you yourself are unknown. Like some bits of me, I was like, I don't even know who I am. There was a separation between the intellectual part of myself and the physical part, and then the emotional part, and how do they even fit back together. And I remember growing up, there's an episode of The Big Bang Theory where Sheldon talks about suppressing his emotions like Spock from Star Trek, and I actually did exactly that. I remember watching it one day and go, oh, that bloke he's trying to separate out his emotions so he doesn't need them, and he's going to be like a Zen monk. But it's not. Understanding and being able to process your emotions as and when they arise is Zen monk like. Not having them is suppression, and it's really unhealthy. It's a big mistake. But these feelings that arise of sort of insignificance and that you're a mistake or a disappointment. And it's not until you come across something that addresses the shame properly and explains it and understands it and helps you deal with these losses that we've gone through many times, the bad behaviors, the self-sabotage. And I ended up getting in a string of really unhealthy relationships where people were codependent on me because I was always the one rescuing everybody, when really I needed somebody to rescue me and tell me what I should be doing and how to look after myself. And to this day, I can do things like run up the wall and do a back somersault. I can do the split. I can lift huge amounts of weight. I can do one-arm chin-ups. I've trained with people all over the world. I'm extremely capable. But 1 or 2 times a week, I get to the point where I'm so tired I can't be bothered to clean my teeth or have a shower. And it's the neglect. And the hardest thing, I've said this to loads of people over the last few months, for me, the hardest thing in my entire life is getting out of bed in the morning. When I wake up, I'm just like, I'll get up when I'm ready to get up. And it's kind of oppositional defiance about going to school. I didn't want to get up at that time to go to school because I haven't even slept properly. And it wasn't that I haven't slept properly, it's that I wasn't comfortable when I went to sleep in the first place because we had men try and burgle the house and we had to fight them off as kids, it's these ridiculous things that affect us later on in life. And it's all behind me now because I've dealt with it. I understand the process. I can live a life that I want to live. I can try to be nice to people even though they're not nice to me sometimes. And I can forgive people that deserve to be forgiven. And I can hold people accountable that deserve to be held accountable, and not forgive. You don't have to forgive everybody. You don't have to pretend that it was all right what people did. And you can stick up for yourself and have a backbone. And that's thanks to Tim Fletcher's Lift program. I hope that made sense, and I hope I didn't go off on too many tangents. And I wish that your hope is restored in yourself and that you realize there is a better way to do things.